If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
All right. Welcome and good morning to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Welcome to the show. All over the world, one of the fastest growing shows, in my opinion, in the world. This show right here, the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. He is on the line, and I will be introducing him to you in just a few moments here. But let's get this out the way. To get in contact with the show, all you have to do is to call 516-453-9921. And be sure to press the number 1 button, as Mansour has done. And Brother Muko is in the house. Oh, yeah. Moon Pie is there. Robert, a whole lot of them. The chat room is open. KJ is in. Sean Glenn is in. That's what you do. Email me, or Gmail me, by doing this, the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com, and I will try to get to as many of them as I can. I was told this morning that, or rather Mr. Fuller and I were told this morning that all the books are up and in. In fact, we have a new shipment in. So thank you for those of you who have bought the books. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that's all I have to do right now. So let me get this out of the way, as I usually start off every program that Mr. Fuller's on, by saying, good morning, Mr. Fuller, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
Okay, let's start the program off. This comes from Mr. Stovall. He says this, Mr. Fuller. He says, Mr. Bobby, at the end of last week's show, Mr. Fuller made a statement regarding how ugly it will get for black Americans the rest of this decade. Can you ask him to elaborate as best as he can as to what he is seeing, and can he correlate it to some of the 9 areas of activity? Thank you.
Well, the way that it looks now, it looks like it's going to be ugly, simply because it seems like there are a lot of white people who are very dissatisfied with the way everything in their individual and maybe extended family or their interactions with other people, the way everything is going is very dissatisfying to them. And when you have huge numbers of white people dissatisfied about anything, it usually means it's going to be pretty ugly for everybody that they are dissatisfied with. So that's why I made the statement that I made. It seems like large, very large numbers, a growing number of white people are looking around and saying things are not going the way that I would have them go. And I don't like a lot of the things that are happening. I approve of some things that are happening, but I don't particularly care for a lot of things that are happening that directly or indirectly involve my existence on this planet and what I choose to do or not do, or choose to be involved in or not be involved in. I think a lot of white people are at the dinner table or wherever they happen to be, the bowling alley, or during the virus being shut in, and they are looking at everything going on around them, and that they are dissatisfied. And when any people are dissatisfied, and those people are in powerful positions, Not saying that all white people are white supremacists, but the white supremacists are dissatisfied with the way the system of white supremacy is being executed or being weakened, then that means that everything is going to get a lot uglier for the non-white people of this planet. And we best be prepared for that ugliness. And I think it might last as long as anywhere from 7 to 10 years with the course that everything is taking right now. That's just my opinion. I hope that I'm incorrect, but I think that non-white people should hope for the best, and certainly not just hope, but work for the best, but expect the absolute worst. Don't be surprised that anything happens that the average person would say should not happen, because I think that it will be, most people would say that the things that are going to happen will probably be pretty ugly.
Okay.
Just an opinion.
Okay. Well, Mr. Stovall asked it, and you answered it, and that's good. 516-453-9921. Let's go to the phone lines, and I believe we're going to get Mansour, if I pronounce it correctly, which I'm notoriously not seem to be doing. But anyway, you are now on, Mansour. Go ahead, sir, with your question for Mr. Fuller. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. This is Mansour Celestin from D.C. I have some quick VG Cube and one question for you today, Mr. Fuller, and I timed this already, so it'll take no longer than 1 minute and 30 seconds, so please bear with me. Neely Fuller Jr., your work has made a profoundly constructive and transformative effect on my life, and I hope you can and will continue in this lifetime and in the lifetimes of every being who will ever exist in the known and unknown universe until the end of time and or existence. According to compensatory logic, I know that you, Neely Fuller Jr., are the embodiment and epitome of a universal man, because when we put food in the oven, we know that our meal will be produced. Neely Fuller Jr., you put the food of the compensatory code in the oven of the system of white supremacy. Therefore, I know that our meal of justice will be produced. My question for you, Mr. Fuller, is, I seem to be encouraging more and more people to read and understand the compensatory code. Are white people and or suspected white supremacists supposed to be reading the compensatory code? And should I discuss the compensatory code with white people and or suspected white supremacists? In other words, Neely Fuller Jr., is it constructive, according to compensatory logic, for any black person anywhere in the known universe at any time to dislike and or hate any white person and or suspected white supremacist? I'm still learning.
Okay, Mr. Fuller.
Well, that's several questions there. I remember the last one that you
That's the
presented.
most important one. Is it constructive for any black person anywhere in the known universe at any time to dislike and or hate any white person or suspected white supremacist? I'm still learning.
No, you don't really dislike or hate anyone, simply because, according to the code, everything is supposed to produce a constructive result. And I'm not sure of what a person means by hate, except what I described in the word guide of the textbook for victims of white supremacy. Hate is submission to fear, to great fear. The things that you fear most, you have a tendency to hate. Okay, so once you arrive at that stage of hate, what do you actually do? Well, you may make a lot of mistakes when you involve in hating someone or intensely disliking someone. You may make mistakes in correcting what you think needs to be corrected. And why is this? Because hate, from what I understand, is an emotion. And hate may be attached, if extreme hate, whatever that means, may be attached to not being logical. You become more and more illogical, and you just thrash out. I mean, because you usually hate comes from fear, and the fear. What is fear? Fear serves a purpose, but fear is best controlled through understanding of what a situation is and what to do about it. So that when you hate someone, it usually means you fear the thing that you hate. That's why the white supremacists, it appears that they hate non-white people because there's something about non-white people that they fear. So they use intelligent fear, though, and that is what non-white people should do. Just if you can't erase fear, and you shouldn't erase fear because fear serves a purpose. But that word hate, that's a word that really shouldn't even exist, in my opinion, because it really doesn't express anything specific except complete submission to fear. But fear serves a purpose. So is hate fear and fear hate? I don't know. I mean, because someone invented the word hate, but I don't see where it really serves any constructive purpose. You examine things, and you examine things that you fear, meaning you don't know enough about the thing that you fear. And fear goes away when you understand how to handle whatever it is that you're afraid of. And that would be the absence of fear. When you know exactly how to handle it in the most constructive manner, that's when the fear is erased. But the fear does alert you that you don't know enough about what it is that you're scared of. But the more you learn about what it is you're afraid of, the fear goes away. I think most people have experienced that. The first time someone saw fire, they didn't know what it was, so they feared it. And so once they learn something about what fire is and what causes it and what purpose it might serve, and they learn how to use fire to do a whole bunch of things. I mean, how to handle steel, you use fire to do that, or how to make steel or whatever they call steel, how to do a lot of things. You can get near the fire in the wintertime, and you feel a little better, but just don't get too close because you get burned. Someone had to find that out by getting burned. You know, just get a certain distance away from the fire, but not too far away because you'll freeze. But if you get close enough, you feel comfortable. And it's the same way with everything in the universe. So, like most of the things that I'm saying here on this air and in the textbook, I might be a little long-winded in answering the question, but you always start with the definition. What do you mean by hate? And what is it? Well, what's the result of hate? And because people are using the term a lot right now. They say we have hate crimes. Well, you know, that whomever uses that term should explain exactly what makes hate a crime. And what is the definition, first of all, of hate? I mean, so, you know, a hate crime, I never really understood that term. I still don't. So I have to do what the code says do. When somebody uses a term, to somebody who is using it should describe in detail exactly what it means. And that's each individual.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. Thank you, Brother Mansour, for your call. And as I always tell everybody that calls in, most of the time, don't be a stranger. Okay, Mr. Fuller, this comes from Evelina. She says this, Mr. Bobby, can you ask Mr. Fuller how a so-called white person can prove to a non-white person that they are not a white supremacist? Thank you.
by doing those things that will prove it. But the code says you're supposed to be suspicious if you're a victim of white supremacy. You are duty bound to be suspicious of every white person. Why? Logically speaking. Because if you don't have a master list of who is a white supremacist and who is not, how are you going to really tell who is a white supremacist and who is not in a system of white supremacy? It's the dominant government of the entire planet. So somebody, and it's logical to think that it has to be a great number of somebodies, or white supremacists. You see that in the news recently. They are saying that a lot of people who are even saying that they are fighting racism, white supremacy, who are white, have turned out to be, just recently they discovered, all white supremacists. They say that the guy next door. I read an article just yesterday where one white person said they didn't know that white person next door thought the way that they did, but they saw him on television storming the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., tearing up things, breaking windows. And there are more and more people are saying, the person next door. You never heard them say anything against black people or anything, and you never really thought about it. But as it turned out, that person is a member of some organization that's dedicated to doing harm to non-white people. So when it comes to, if even white people, some of them are claiming that they don't know who's a racist, how can a non-white person know? When white people are next door to each other and maybe play cards with each other, invite each other to each other's houses, if they don't know, how can non-white people know who have been assigned sections of towns and cities that are virtual, practical prison camps or prison sites, because they have made the white supremacists have made the whole world a prison camp for all non-white people. We can only go where they say go. That's a prison. We only go where they say go, and when you can go, and what you can do when you get there. If you got color in your skin, the white supremacists tell you what you can do. When you can get on a boat and go here and go there, and get on a plane and go here and go there. Why? Because they are the greatest government, most powerful government that's worthy of the name government on the planet. And if you're a person of color, you can only appear or show up or leave or arrive at places that they have assigned you. So in answer to the question, there's no way for you to know who is or who isn't a racist. So logically speaking, you suspect anybody, this is what the code says, anybody who is classified as white, who is able, underline the word able, to be a white supremacist, probably is one and should be expected to be one until proven different. Proven different to whom? To whomever does the suspecting. And every non-white person should suspect every white person who is able, underline, able to be a white supremacist as being a white supremacist. And you have to prove it to each. If you're going to prove it, if you're white, the concept is, if you're going to prove to a non-white person that you are not a racist, you have to prove it to each individual non-white person that you are not a racist. Proving it to a few won't do. You have to do it with every non-white person that you meet. Each and every one. No one can vouch for you. as being a non-racist in a system of white supremacy. It's not logical.
Okay. All righty. 516-453-9921. Make sure you press the number 1 button. The numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com if you elect to choose a Gmail. From the chat room, JJ is in the house, along with Be Good One and Sean Glenn, too. Says this, Mr. Fuller. What is Mr. Fuller's take on the new interest on white supremacy, and what should be our protective posture?
Now, you have that question again? I want to make sure that I'm answering the question.
Okay. What is Mr. Fuller's take on the new interest on white supremacy, and what should be our protective posture?
It should be the same always. You have a system of white supremacy in place, and I say the system of white supremacy in capital letters, which means it's the dominant system of interaction between people on the planet. It's the most distinctive system of all so-called subsystems, if there are any such things. And the reaction to it on the part of the victims of white supremacy is you codify everything in a counter-racist manner, so that everything that you do works against the system of white supremacy as best you can, and in the interest of replacing it with something better. And that something better would be the system of justice. And what is justice according to the code? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help in every area of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And you don't leave out any area of activity in your codification. Codification means what? You do the best possible thing that can be done or will ever be done in each one of those areas of activity that will produce what? The most constructive result. That's the key. And you have to have a code for doing that will lead you there. How do you get there? By trial and error, like all things are invented. Because the racists have a code. That's why they're successful. That's already in place. It's the most powerful code for dominating and mistreating people in recorded history. It is proven to be that. And material-wise, it produces a lot of great things because it is so efficient. But it is very destructive of people of color, because that's what it's designed to do. And so in order to counteract that, you have to have a better system, and theoretically, that system would be a system of justice, which has never, in recorded history, been produced, because people have never taken it seriously, in my opinion.
Okay. All righty. Let's see here. I'm looking at my board here. I don't know if this is correct, but I'll just say this. It says Selena has a question for the second half of the show. Okay, Selena, now I'm going to do it as it says here, but okay. I guess you want to listen to the first half and then ask the question on the second half. That's what I am going to assume, which is a bad word, but okay. In that case, let me do this. Let's do this so that Joshua can be heard. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, simply call 516-453-9921. Press the number 1 button if you have a question or comment. Make it short. Please make it sweet. And if you'd like to Gmail me, you can at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Please, ma'am, please, sir, do not write me a novel. Make it short and sweet so it can be read, or I can't read it. Okay, moving right along. 516-453-9921. Let's go to the DMV, Delaware, Virginia, Maryland. We're going to have Joshua up. Okay, wait a minute, Joshua, if I can get you in. There you go. Joshua, what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning,
Good
Mr.
morning.
Fuller.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, sir.
I'm one of those people that have boasted or bragged about ancient Kemetic people created civilization until I heard you say, what have black people done lately, which I agree with. So my question is, besides entertainment, could you share with me some examples of what black people can do constructively with information we get from reading literature, listening and participating in lectures, watching TV and movies based on ancient Egypt and other parts of Africa?
Well, the whole purpose for studying anything in a problem-filled world is to solve the problems. So anything that you study you should come up with something that's going to solve a problem. Otherwise, you're studying just to be studying. And no one should be studying anything just to be studying. You should have a reason for what you study. And that reason should be, if you're in a problem-filled world, and this world seems to be loaded with problems, everything that you study should be connected with solving whatever problem you think you should be working on first of the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the system of white supremacy, because that's the most powerful problem on the planet among the people now, according to evidence based on logic and evidence. That's the way that is, unless I have misdiagnosed that. But that's the conclusion I've come to, and that's why I wrote the book that I wrote, and that's why I'm on the air now talking. The system of white supremacy is the biggest problem among people on the planet. It's made everything miserable. It's made a lot of people physically comfortable more than any other system that has come before it in recorded history, as far as I know, in everything that I've studied and read. I mean, and it's done it in record time, you might say, with great speed. System of white supremacy is very efficient when it comes to getting things done, more than anything I've ever heard about. But in the process of getting things done, material things produced, it destroys people by the shipload. I mean, and part of the destruction includes enjoyment of the destruction. The white people who practice white supremacy, they got smiles on their faces when they're destroying people and when they're destroying some things. They worship destruction. They know how to build, and they do build better than anybody else. They know how to put things together, and they know how to take things apart. And they take little people of color at an early age and study them and enslave them and then teach them to do all kinds of stupid stuff that leads to destruction, and then sit back and laugh about it. Now, that's evil, and it should be replaced. So, everything that you study, everything that a non-white person studies, should be for the purpose, either directly or indirectly, looking at a movie or, or writing a song or listening to a song, you should be thinking all the time, how can this be used to help to replace that evil system called the system of white supremacy with a system of justice, which means guaranteeing that no one is ever mistreated in any area of activity, and that every person who needs help the most gets the most constructive help immediately. That would be the compensatory definition for justice, in my opinion. And that would be a much better system. And we would have universal man and universal woman doing the most constructive things that people could ever do, each and every one, all of the time, and enjoying it, rather than enjoying going around tearing up things and tearing up people, filling their veins full of poison, and laughing about it.
All righty. Thank you, Joshua, and do not be a stranger to this program. Thank you very much for your question. Mr. Fuller, this comes from the COVID comic. Says this: anyone that thinks there is no racism, so the code is useless, is obviously in denial. They have chosen to wear blinders when they hang around their white fake friends because they have run out of patience dealing with black people and victimhood. These are people that become the sellouts in Uncle Tom's who screw black people over and sell us out because they are full of self-hatred. I know it's VGQ for them, but obviously they have mental, emotional, psychological, and spiritual issues they need to address. You have to be insane to say racism doesn't exist, and hence the code is useless or not needed. Simply out of your mind, but still in your cotton-picking mind as a slave. That was VGQ from COVID Comic. Okay, let's move on here. Let's go to, let's go to Japan, where it is, 11:32, maybe, 11:32 p.m. Let's go to Che, if I pronounced it right. Let me see if I can get it up in there. Okay, Jay, you are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question from Japan?
Oh, good evening, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. Good morning to the two of you, I guess.
Yeah, it is 11:30 there, isn't it? 11:33 or whatever?
Yeah, it's about that, exactly, 11:33.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Kind of a personal question. Me, myself, I used to find myself getting into, let's say, debates about racial or white supremacy issues with suspected racists, and trying to convince them of something, or I don't know. But I feel now, after listening to Mr. Fuller for so long, I feel that there's something inside of me that somehow seeking. I don't know if I'm subconsciously seeking their approval or seeking to try and win them over or what it is, but I don't think it's the most constructive use of my time anymore. And so I'd just like to ask, in often when these sort of issues come up, what's the codified procedure? How should I be speaking with suspected racists or even non-white people who are not codified when sort of these issues of racism or white supremacy come up? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Never talk to anyone about race, racism, or counter-racism unless that person agrees to talk about it. And you usually, the codified procedures, wait for them to mention it. Wait for the person that you're talking to say, I want to talk about racism. I want to ask you something. I want to tell you something about what I think. And then you simply listen. That's the codified procedure, but don't you bring it up. You can bring up what? In a compensatory way. That's a part of the title of the book, compensatory. Say if you don't bring it up and they don't bring it up, what do you do? What do you bring up? You bring up the subject of justice and give it that definition, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That way you don't get conflict, or you get less conflict, or you get a discussion that you can control rather than a debate or an argument, because you should never get into an argument about anything. What's the difference between an argument and a conversation? The difference between an argument and a conversation is an argument is designed to win arguments. A conversation is designed to solve problems. So what's the best codified way of doing that? Questions and answers. And you don't bring up any subject to anyone, not only the subject of racism, unless that person is interested, directly or indirectly, in the subject. And how do you get to the core of the subject? You might say, well, you'll never get around to talking about racism. Oh, yes, you will. But let them bring it up. When you start talking about justice, the subject of racism is going to come up if you keep talking. If that other person keeps talking, and they are going to bring it up, either directly or indirectly, in one or more of the areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war. It's going to come up because it's there. Because racism is the dominant political and religious influence on planet Earth. So it's got to come up. But don't you bring it up. It's going to come up in the conversation, and the way you tap it, like tapping into the ground so that you get oil, I mean, it's going to come gushing up, all right? Out of the ground, you might say. It's going to. And how do you tap it? You just start talking about anything that has to do with treating people correctly. That's how that's your foot in the door. Now, the person that you're talking to don't know where it's going to lead, but you know where it's going to lead before you start talking. And if you don't believe it, try it. Just start talking about justice. It's going to lead right to the door of talking about racism. But just wait, be patient, because the other person is going to bring it up, one way or another, directly and indirectly.
All righty. All right, Jay from Japan, thank you for your call. Don't be a stranger. 11:38 p.m. in Japan, worldwide programming. All right, thank you very much. Okay, let's do this here. Mr. Fuller, let's do this. Let's talk about your book. Yeah, go ahead. Talk about your book there, Mr. Fuller.
Well, the book is about one thing. And by that one thing, it's talking about everything, including what most people would call life itself. If you're a person of color, why are you here? Here where? Wherever you are on this planet. Because wherever you are, if you're a person of color, you are subject to the dictates of the white supremacists, either directly or indirectly, in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics meaning just interaction between people. You're subject to the white supremacists if you have color in your skin. Politics, religion, you're subject to the white supremacists regardless of what your religion is or is not. And you better see to it that your religion doesn't irritate the white supremacists, or you're going to have to modify that religion. You're going to have to go through the religious books and change a lot of stuff. or it's changed some stuff, or whatever stuff the white supremacists said, oh, you can do this, that, and the other, according to your religion. But with that color in your skin, you dare not do this, this, and this. This thing that's going on page so-and-so that it says you must do in order to conform to your religion. No, this thing on this page in your holy book doesn't apply to you when it comes to me, because you're violating something that you're doing something that I disapprove of if you do that. So you change that. You skip over that. You can leave it on the books, but don't you dare try to practice it on my planet or in my universe, because I tell you what to do in your religion. So you better modify that on page so-and-so and so-and-so of your holy book, okay? And it has been my observation, just as an aside, that the non-white people who claim that they have that thing, whatever it is, as part of their religion, they'll change it. And we see a lot of that going on now, particularly in the so-called Christian religion, whatever that means. You see people going along with stuff that they said just a few years ago, stuff you do not do. Now the white supremacists said, hey, you will do it. I endorse it. I'm all in favor of it. I'm on board with it because it makes me stronger and makes you people of color weaker. So my code is superior to any of your religious codes, because I tell you what to do and how you will practice your religion and how you will modify it to serve my purposes, regardless of what you think. And so that's the way that goes. So you be aware that the white code, the white supremacist code, is the most powerful political and religious code ever invented in recorded history, whereas non-white people are concerned. So you have to have, in order to counter a code, meaning something that every time they do it, it works, you have to come up mathematically with every part of their code, study it, what it is and how it works, and come up with a counter code. Because anything that shouldn't exist, there should be a code that makes it non-existent. Anything that comes into existence. The only thing that will counter one code, meaning a way of doing things that works, is a code that will stop that thing from working, if that thing should be stopped. That's the nature of the universe. Nothing short of a code will do that, because codes are exact.
Okay, so we can get the book at where now?
You can get the book by going to producejustice.com, producejustice.com, and it's called A Compensatory Counter-Racist Code, and it's in 2 volumes, and also you'll see the original volume that's up there, but I recommend the latest volume, the 2016 version, and the additional volume, because they're basically the same book. The Word Guide, the 2016 volume and the 2010 volume are the same book, but they're in 2 volumes. But the basic volume is the 2016. That's the latest.
Okay.
And it's supposed to tell the individual victim of white supremacy what to do, what not to do, make suggestions. You don't have to do them. Those that don't make sense to you, you don't bother with that. Something has to make sense to you in order for you to use it. Go to producejustice.com.
Okay, now, one more thing. Before we get off the book, what other information is on producejustice.com that one could or might be interested in?
Oh, any information that's on that website that you have, you can use. Sometimes there's it advertises other programs that I might be on. Principally, lately, it's just I've been limited to the Carl Nelson show. I used to be on something called TalkTameItRadio.com, and I was on that for a number of years out of Columbus, Ohio. And you can go to the Carl Nelson show, WOL, when it is advertised at that website.
Yes.
And
yes.
I do talking just like I do on this show, questions and answers. And
yes,
I'd like to add, most shows that consist of questions and answers, regardless who is on the show, you get that formula is a codified formula. Questions and answers is what runs the universe. So the more answers you can get to questions about problem solving, logically speaking, the more problems you can solve.
Mm-hmm.
So this show is all about questions and answers. Not that Neely Fuller has the answers. He's searching for the answers. That's why I always say I'm still learning.
Yes.
But the way to get answers to questions ought to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you don't get an immediate answer, if your first answer is I don't know, which is the answer to most questions, then if you don't know, that means what? You ask another question until you find out.
Mm-hmm.
That's the procedure.
All righty. And I'd just like to add that on my site, I do, or if you go to numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY at gmail.com, I will also tell you, to the people that maybe don't have access, I will give you the information when Mr. Fuller is on the Carl Nelson Show out of Washington, D.C., WOL 1450 on the dial, because I can't hardly get enough of Mr. Fuller, but I will also inform you, so it is all there. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. Let's move on. Let's go down to the 646. That would be, at least on the board, it says Georgia. And we got Raymond. Raymond, let me see if I can get you up in here. Muko, you're on deck. Okay, Raymond, we got you in here. Good morning, and what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I got a suggestion about the word guide. I opened it the first time. I have it for 5 months, and I open it to page 214, 215. My suggestion is that the back is a little thin. It could get a little more thicker and more elongate. That's it, just a suggestion. I would like you to elaborate on the third paragraph on the same 214. And then I have a question about the code concept after, please.
If it's quick, I can do it. Go ahead, please, sir.
Yeah, sure. You could make it short. Elaborate on the third paragraph on 214.
Yeah, go ahead.
On page 214?
No, Fuller. Yes, sir.
On page 214, you want to know what?
No, me personally take it for what it is, but I like to just you elaborate just a little bit on it, sir. Is it true that in the system? Yeah.
Oh, well, it says several things on page 214. Now, at the bottom of the page, you have lynching.
No. I'm saying on the third paragraph going up, from the bottom going up.
From the bottom going up.
Yeah.
The third paragraph.
It says, is it true that...
Yeah,
that's
it begins with, is it true?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
The words, is it true?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Is it true that in the system of white supremacy, the people who are most often regarded as low in status are most often people who are black or dark in appearance? Well, this is a question that you ask. So all questions have answers, even if the answer is I don't know. So is it true that in the system of white supremacy, the people who are most often regarded as low in status, quote unquote, are most often people who are black or dark in appearance? And the answer to that in the system of white supremacy is yes. Is there reason to believe? I'll continue. Seems to be another question here. Is there reason to believe that words like low, low down, low as dirt, dirty linen, rather, dirty image, mud slinging, or words that have been made popular by white supremacists in order to associate all that is said to be unworthy with dark, and then in parentheses, non-white people. Now, is all of this true? And the answer is yes. All of that is true.
Yes. Yeah, that's
yes,
what,
that's that third part. That's what. Yes, that is true. And I think anybody that go.
Yeah, I took it.
And most recently.
I took it for what it is.
Yes, and I want to say something about that word dark. It seems like it's being used now more than ever. They talk about dark moods, and I'm talking about people who are supposed to be helping black people. And black people themselves are saying these are dark times. And we need to get rid of these dark times and have more light. Do we really know what we're saying? Time is not dark. I mean, time is time. What does that have to do with dark? See, this is white supremacist language. And we should ask people, what do you mean when you say dark? When people use that word dark, and it seems like to you it's out of place, and it's excellent that you're bringing this up, because I want to harp on that word dark. That word dark is being used. I'm looking at the newspapers today, today's paper, and just seeing how dark is showing up all over the place. And you see politicians using it. I mean, just listen carefully, and see how that word dark just shows up out of nowhere. And it's attached to things that, when you think about it, like a dark mood, sometimes they'll even say it was a dark day. And when you check the weather, it wasn't a dark day. But see, they associate it. See, it's an indirect way of associating dark people with everything that shouldn't be.
Okay.
Start paying more attention to. See, we know about the word black, but we don't pay enough attention to the use of that word dark. Just start paying attention every time you hear it, and then see if it's not out of place. Most of the time, it is. It's not describing anything as it is at all.
Yes, sir. And just a quick one, Mr. Bobby. Mr. Fuller, I just got the concept, right? Just explain. I know I take it for I think I have the reason why, but explain why economics take up a whole quarter of the book, please, and I'll take my answer off the phone.
All right.
I'll still listen. Yeah.
You say what now? I didn't quite get the question. Was it cut off?
No. Go ahead, Raymond, about that question about economics.
No, I said economics took up a quarter of the book.
Economics is just a quarter of the book?
Yeah, yes, sir. Explain. I have my reason why you did it, sir, but you could just a short brief on it, please. I take it off the phone. I listen.
Well,
right.
Economics, all of these areas of activity are segmented, but they all blend one into another. Whatever happens in economics has something to do with labor. Whatever happens in the area of labor has to do with religion. Whatever happens in religion has to do with sex. Whatever happens to do in sex has to do with economics. All of these are just labels about what people do. I just segmented them. I don't even say divided because they're really not divided. One blends into another. Well, what happens in the field of education has to do with what happens in the field of economics. So it comes down to, what is education? Education is a process of learning everything about everything. That's why people are always learning. Even when you're dying, you're learning because you never died before. Not that you can remember anyway. I mean, so what is economics? According to the code, economics is time and energy. the use of time and energy. That's basic economics. We usually think of economics just being money. That's what the white supremacists center on, because they know that they control money. But they don't control all time and all energy, because time and energy is all over the universe. They don't control that yet, but they control the time and energy of dark people, of people of color, all right, which is good enough for them. And so economics means you get control of your time and your energy first. If you go chasing after money, they control the money and the value of money, because people of color are money. The white supremacists use anything for money that they say is money. Slave trade, that's money. That Negro, that slave, that blackamoor, that's money. That's walking money. I say that it's money. See, whatever, if you're dominant among people, you dominate whatever you say is money. And you can make money anything. You can pick up a rock and say that diamonds are not going to be money anymore. They're not worth anything. And you say, why? Why is it that diamonds are not worth anything? Because I said so. So if you get control of people's time and energy, you got money. And the white supremacists understand that principle, because everything is just a matter of who dominates who in the form of people. And if you can dominate people, you have all the money that those people will ever get. Why? Because whatever they have, you have, because you are dominating them. The white supremacists understand that principle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. Thank you, Brother Raymond, from the great state of Georgia. Thank you. Don't be a stranger. Okay, let me do this. To my producers, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in Brother Muko, and we're probably going to go over well, okay, let's do it now. That's okay. We can do it now. We can do it now. Listen, I'm going to close out this first hour just a little bit earlier so that we can do what we have to do. You have been listening to the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. We thank you for your listenership and hope that you find time to listen again. Don't be a stranger. Now, for those of you who are hanging on and will be ready for the second hour, which will commence in just a few moments, we thank you too. So on behalf of Mr. Fuller and myself and all my producers and all those who are responsible for putting this great program on the air, we thank you. Stay tuned for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller in 5 seconds. All righty. Let's say good morning to all for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, just simply dial 516-453-9921, or you can Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com, and I will at some point read your Gmail as I have been trying to mix them in. But the callers come first and the Gmails when we get time to mix them in, but I do try to do that. So thank you for that. We'd like to thank you for listening. Thank you for those who listened to the first hour. If you didn't listen to it, go back, play it back. Usually 10 to 15 minutes after the show, the entire program is up on the board so that you can review the whole show. When you call that number and you have a question or VGQ, just press the number 1 button and you will get in line, and when I get to you, you can do your question. Please, ma'am, please, sir, be brief, and please, ma'am, please, sir, be clear, because we've been having a little thing here, so we want to be clear so that Mr. Fuller can answer your question. Okay, to round out the first hour, which we did, but We're going to go to Brother Muko, and then Selena, we're going to get you because you have been patiently holding on. So let's go to Brother Muko. By the way, anybody that has any information on the extermination man from Chicago who used to call in when Mr. Fuller and I were on TalkTameItRadio.com, he used to call in all the time and give his grave warnings, and a lot of people have asked about him. So anybody that knows any information about Extermination Man, have him call in. Okay, one of our great longtime listeners, good brother Muko, and his care unit from the great city of Baltimore. Brother Muko, thank you for holding, and how are you this morning?
How you doing, Mr. Bobby? Mr. Fuller, how you doing? I wanted to give one VGQ and ask a question to Mr. Fuller. My VGQ is lately I have had a lot of suspected white supremacist customers, and one in particular, she always asks me, Brother Muko, how do you feel? What would you change about this system if you had one thing you can change? And I always say to her, because she is a suspected white supremacist, and I follow the code that Neely Fuller suggests, and it never fails me. I told to her, I said, Diane, that's her name, the suspected white supremacist. I said, Diane, if you really want to help, you can give me and other non-white people like me a list of white people that practice racism, white supremacy. I said, and you could tell them to stop because it's a crime. And every time, I do a lot of work for this lady, and every time she brings up this conversation, and I kind of shut it down with that. And but I said that to say every non-white person that's listening to this program, questions and answers. Mr. Fuller has been saying this for over 3-4 decades, even before I was born. Questions and answers, and everybody always skips the questions and answers and makes statements. So my question for Mr. Fuller, that ends my VGQ, by the way. My question for Mr. Fuller is for my care unit in Baltimore, and I have a care unit in Compton also as well. Shout outs to the Community Education Network, Each One Teach One, my brother Rashaki. But for my care units all around the world, Mr. Fuller, can you please explain and expound on the white supremacists playing all sides or both sides of every argument? Because it seems that a lot of people are getting confused by the distractions, the march on the White House, the white supremacists walking into their headquarters. A lot of people are confused, and they're getting confused because a lot of suspected white supremacists and white supremacists are playing both sides of this argument. So can you expound on the importance of that and why we should pay attention to that and not be confused by that? Hope that wasn't too long.
Thank you, Brother Muko.
Well, you can just take that for what it's worth. Do the white supremacists take all sides of every argument so that they position themselves so that they can't lose? Logically speaking, anybody who can very skillfully take every side of every argument is always going to be a winner. How can you lose when you take every side of every argument? You're in a winning position. Win, 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 win. You can't lose if you're going to take every side. They are very skillful at doing that. But how you counteract that is just simply stay focused on what you are supposed to be producing. Regardless of what everybody else is saying, you can listen to what they're saying, and you should, okay? But all you have to do is just ask questions, because the question should be, basic question is, what are you doing, ma'am or sir? Like the call is giving an illustration of a white person that they talk to all the time. And so what you do is just say, your best suggestion is have every person understand the definition of justice, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help in whatever area of activity it happens to be, on the job, or on so-called vacation, wherever you happen to be. There are people. So you interact with people. So people usually have problems. Everybody has some type of problem. That's all any white person or any non-white person or any person, period, of any age, any group, can just remember. We're supposed to be in the process of producing one product right now, and that product is called justice, which means in every situation somebody usually has a problem that's caused by the promotion of non-justice. So how do you counteract that? When you're talking to a white person, you just simply say, wherever you happen to be, just ask a question. That's how you get the answers that you're supposed to get. You always ask questions. Stay in the question lane. Say, is everybody here, or is anybody here being mistreated? That's wherever you happen to be, on the job, anywhere else. Is anybody in this room being mistreated? You're in a room of 15 people on the job, and you're having a meeting. Just ask for permission to ask questions, a couple. And when you are given permission, you say, I have 2 questions. Is there anybody in this room who is being mistreated here on this job? Anybody, hold up your hand. One hand might go up in a room of 50 people, or every hand might go up in a room of 50 people. Now you got your work cut out for you. You start with everybody and say, just tell them, make a list, write down what it is so that we can go through it thoroughly, how you are being mistreated. Everybody. And have them do that. If not then, at some other time. I mean, you can set the time, you can hang it loose so that everybody can be honest and think it through and all like that. And say, just tell the truth now. If you're being mistreated or you think you're being mistreated, just write down how you're being mistreated. You don't have to name any names. Just write down how you think you're being mistreated. And what do you suggest be done about it? You can add that if you want to. If not, then don't. Just say you're being mistreated. So when you look through those 50 names and they describe how they are being mistreated, whenever you can schedule it to look through it, make sure you go through them thoroughly, and then you figure out who's being mistreated the most. I mean, who's got the longest list of things that are happening right there that constitute mistreatment. Because nobody's supposed to be mistreated at any time, nowhere on the planet, ever. Otherwise, you don't have justice. So then you start with the person who has the longest list, you might say, of being incidents or whatever, or conditions of mistreatment. And you work back. It might be the person number 10. It might be person number 49. It might be person number 8. Whatever. Start with that person and then work back. That's the compensatory logical way to proceed. The person who is being mistreated most, relieve that burden first, just like you do on a rescue mission. You take the person who is most vulnerable. If a boat turns over and everybody falls overboard, you take the person who is in the, everybody but one person can swim. You go after the person who can't swim. That's the logical procedure. Everybody else is in the water, but this is the person that can't swim at all. So that's who you grab first, if you know that person can't swim. Codification is all about just using logic. It ain't personal. It's logic. You don't follow people. Follow logic. Logic will always take you where you need to go. Logic came with the universe. Now, that's the first part. The second part is you got to guarantee that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, the second part blends right into the first part. You got to guarantee that nobody's mistreated. And so you do every situation like that. When you're talking to white people, when you're talking to black people, rather than do all this shouting and cursing and whatnot and going back and forth and name calling, that's non-productive. That shouldn't happen. You just say, hey, center on justice. Just that word and the compensatory definition for it, because this definition is not in any dictionary that I know about, because I came up with that definition searching for a logical definition for the word justice. I couldn't find one. I looked in encyclopedias and all that. I didn't find one that I thought really went right to the chase. Yeah, 2 parts. Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's part 1. Part 2, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. And that's what you tell everybody. You don't even have to mention anything about race, racism, or counter-racism. Because if you start talking about people who are being mistreated, black people can run to the head of that line, all right? Real easy.
For sure, yeah.
And be telling the truth, all right? So that's automatic anyhow, all right? If you start talking about people who need help the most, black people again. Me too, all right? Run to the head of the line again, all right? After you went to the back of the line, I mean, after getting that mistreatment part, you can run to the head of the line on that second part. So
yes,
that's
sir.
the way that will work. Without you even mentioning race. You just take it, who's being mistreated. That's all. And who needs help the most. Boom, boom, back to back. And every conversation can be like that. Everywhere, on a job, anywhere else. In answer to that person's question about talking to that white lady, just tell her, spread that word. Guarantee that nobody's mistreated. And guarantee that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help, wherever you are. Tell all the white associates that. And everything will be solved if everybody does that.
All righty. All right, Brother Muko, thank you. And you know the deal. Don't be a stranger. And thank you for picking up my other page here. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to the 610 area code. This lady has been on for a long time, but she requested that. Let's go to Selena. Selena, you are on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning. Good morning, Mr. Bobby, and good morning, Mr. Fuller. I apologize because I was actually driving and I wasn't able to give my undivided attention. That's why I requested to be put on in the second half.
Okay.
I have a VGQ and also a question. First, my VGQ is to answer the 4 questions that Mr. Fuller be asking, what is it you want to do? And the answer to that question is improve toxic relationships between non-white individuals, starting with my own. What do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Because all relationships between non-white individuals are lacking balance. How do you plan to do this thing that you want to do? Well, I plan on doing it with a code, which is BAR, boundaries, acknowledging each other, and respect. What do you expect the constructive result to be? BHS, which is balance, because if you set boundaries, you will have a balanced relationship, and that will be also a healthy relationship, and you will have some sanity. Now, my question is, knowing the truth that we are victims of white supremacy and accepting that, we are victims and agreeing to do something about it, which is following that cold bar, and it seems to be causing more problems due to a person that have narcissistic traits, what will be the solution to that?
Well, you don't make judgments about how a person is. You say narcissistic? Did you say that?
Narcissistic,
what does that mean?
Yes. Well,
what does that mean?
It means for someone to have to to be one's awareness of self. Like they always want to be center of attention. They making it all about them. They making you feel like you're in the wrong. They don't want to, listen to you. It's all about them.
Well, you just ask them that 4 questions. That should do it. The 4 questions that you just mentioned on page 171, 172 of the basic textbook of the 2016 edition. Page 171, 172. You ask yourself these questions first because you got a reason for talking to the person that you're talking to. All right, so you want something out of that. So it's something you're trying to accomplish. And so you answer those questions to yourself first. And then you can ask that person, and you can't get lost. Those 4 wants, everybody wants something. So when you ask a person, what do you want to do? Because everybody wants to do something if they're awake. Once they wake, they're wide awake and they're walking around, as you might say, under normal conditions or abnormal conditions. They want to do something. So what do you want to do? That's question number 1. Just ask them that. Why do you want to do what you want to do? You don't have to get into a thing about how narcissistic they are or whatever, description you have for them. You don't make that kind of evaluation. You just simply ask questions. Why? Because universal logic says all problems, all, underlined, are solved through the process of questions and answers. So you ask that person, just like you just did. What do you want, W-A-N-T, those 4 wants, what do you want to do? Question 2, why do you want to do what you want to do? Question number 3, how do you plan to do what you want to do? And number 4, what do you expect the constructive result to be? Now, I have a question, and that is, just since you gave an example, did you ask them that question, that person that question, and what was their answer? Those 4 questions. Hello.
I told them, like, I was asking the questions and I answered them. So no, I didn't do that, but they agreed to the code that I have created, which was BAR.
They agreed with what?
With the code that I came up with, which is BAR, setting boundaries, acknowledging one another, and respecting one another.
Okay, well, even when you said all of that, the code covers that thing about respect. That word jumped out at me right away. One thing, that's one of the things you never ask anybody to do. I'm just going to say that because that's in the code. And what is that? You never ask anybody for respect, ever. On a job or any place else. Don't ever say, you respect me. Don't ever ask or demand anybody ever to give you respect. The code says why? Because respect is what you give yourself. Nobody can give you respect. Anybody who can give you respect, they can't do it anyway, but you think that's what they're giving you, that means they can take it away from you anytime they get ready. That makes you vulnerable. Nothing in the code is supposed to make you weaker than you already are. You're supposed to become stronger. If you give yourself respect, and what is respect? See what I mean? What is that word? What does it really mean? Respect, according to the code, is not lying to yourself and letting everybody know that you're not going to lie to yourself. You might be forced at gunpoint to lie to somebody else in order to keep breathing. But don't you ever lie to yourself. You lie to yourself, you're through booking. That's why you never ask anybody to respect you. Now, sometimes people mix up the word respect with the word courteous. If a person is discourteous, what does the code say about what you do? You never let anyone be more courteous than you. No matter how discourteous they get, the more discourteous they are, name calling, cursing, stomping on the floor, yelling loud, the quieter you get. The louder they get, the quieter you get. The more what you might call name calling and all like that, the more they do that, you don't do any of that. You don't ever let anybody be more courteous than you under any circumstance. That's code.
Okay.
They start shouting, you start getting quieter. The louder they get, the quieter you get. You do just the opposite. You don't escalate by getting loud too. That's our usual knee-jerk reaction. No, just let them blow up. Run them down the street. I mean, yell. I mean, kick the tree, kick the fire plug, whatever. You stay right where you are like a rock. They say black people let their emotions govern them. And that is a real problem. Emotions are supposed to be attached to what? Logic. Right. Emotions serve a purpose, but that purpose in order for it to come out the way it ought to. So you never ask anybody for an apology, you never ask for respect, and you never ask for love. Those are the three things you never ask for. Why? Because you give respect to yourself. And as far as an apology is concerned, and love, if someone is going to give it to you, you'll know it. If you have to ask for it, it ain't no good no way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, thank you, Selena, for your patience, and glad you got to wherever you were safely. That's good. And as I tell everybody, most of the time, don't be a stranger. Mr. Fuller, going back to what Selena had mentioned about respect, in the movie Harlem Nights, there was a scene where Della Reese kicked Eddie Murphy's tail, and she told him, as she was whipping him, that he was going to have to learn how to respect her. And she was, taking some punches and just whacking him all in his face. And then she said, and the next time that you disrespect me, I'm going to kick your tail again. I mean, I can't ask her because obviously she's deceased, but the portrayal in the movie, when she mentioned about respect, what was that?
Well, it depends on what the result is. Now, that's teaching people, according to the code, when you teach somebody by force a lesson, they're going to learn that lesson, and they're going to say the way you teach people is by force. And that's not the way to teach according to the code. You teach people by using words in such a way that they understand what you're saying and they see the logic of what you're saying. That way they will function on their own because they will see that the results are much better. Everything that is logical, that is constructive, is arrived at by what's the best way to go about doing everything or anything. And you figure out the best way. Now, that's not the best way to get the most constructive result. When you teach people to use violence to get the result that they want, violence is what they're going to go around doing. And they're going to do that about everything, okay? That's why this thing about putting a whipping on children rather than talking to them is not the best way. That's one way of doing it, But that's not the best way. Codification is about doing everything the best way it will ever be done in 1 trillion years. That's the way the code is supposed to go. I mean, that should be the intention. When you codify something, it's supposed to work better than anything ever will work.
Okay. All righty. Let's go to a brother from South Africa, Malungisi. Says this: Good day, Mr. Fuller. In the book for victims of racism, Mr. Fuller, you said that non-white people must expect the white supremacists to cause them to lose money. Can you, Mr. Fuller, kindly explain how the white supremacists cause non-white people to lose money and how non-white people can counter this? Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Manglisi from South Africa.
Just do the best you can to hold on to the money that you have and do not spend it for anything except for constructive reasons. Always ask yourself when you get ready to buy anything, is this going to produce a constructive result? And if so, what is that constructive result? Otherwise, put that money back in your pocket. If you're fixing to buy some bottle of alcoholic drink, ask yourself, I'm spending this money. This money is difficult to get. Now, this thing that I'm buying, is it going to produce a constructive result in my body? Yes or no? That's code. That's solid. Yes or no. It's either going to be constructive or non-constructive. Every move that every creature makes is going to produce a constructive or a non-constructive result. There's no such thing as in between. Now, that's the only way you can do it in the system of white supremacy. What little money they allow you to have, try to make it work for you, not against you. Now, they're going to give you always a limited amount. And if they give you a lot, they usually see to it that you use it for a purpose that makes them stronger and makes you weaker, whether you're aware that you're being made weaker or not. That's the white supremacist way of handling money.
Mm-hmm.
They are the masters of money. They are the masters of money. You don't become stronger because you have money. You become stronger in your mind that because you have money, now you can do anything. You can overrule the white supremacists. The white supremacists don't allow you to have that much money because they're going to have control over you because you are their money. If you're a person of color,
yes,
you are the most precious money that they have in the system of white supremacy. So as long as they dominate you, they dominate everything that you have. So you use a little bit that they allow you to have in such a manner that you make it work for you and against them if you can. But when you do that, they're aware of that too. Yes. They're aware of where their money goes and how far it will go and what it will do because they're aware of what non-white people will do and won't do and how far they can go because they know us better than we know them. That's their money.
That's their
knowledge.
Money. Okay. Mm-hmm. Knowledge is their money. Okay, let's pause here. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And if you would like to become part of the show or have a question or comment, call this number, 516-453-9921. Again, 516-453-9921. And if you'd like for me to ask your question, you can do that, but actually don't do it today because I'm probably not going to read it, but it will be read at some time. Just go to the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com, and at some point in time I will answer or have the question read before Mr. Fuller so that he may answer that question. That is the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Please do not write me a novel. And when you do call in, depress the number 1 button so that you can get in line or rotation for Mr. Fuller to answer your question. Okay, we are storming into the last half hour of the Counter Racist Code Show, and I believe we are going to go to Los Angeles. I believe that's my brother Swa. Let's see here. Swa, are you there? Are you still there?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead with your question, please.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Neely Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
My question for you, Mr. Neely Fuller, is should counter racists be producing things in the entertainment area of people activity that indirectly or directly expose the race war going on, and also implant in the people's minds the ideas of producing justice?
Can you use entertainment to put in people's minds the idea of producing justice? Is that the question?
No. Basically, should counter racists be producing counter racist propaganda in the form of books and other forms of entertainment that implant into people's minds the will to produce justice?
Can you use entertainment to put in people's minds? What are you saying?
Should counter racists be producing entertainment that do those things? Should we be writing books and other forms of entertainment?
In other words, in counter racist science, can you use entertainment to counter racism? Is that what you're saying?
Can we produce entertainment to do that? For example, producing a book that talks about the race war in a coded way that can be like spread around like Harry Potter in a sense, but instead of getting those kind of messages that you get from Harry Potter, one will be getting counter racist messages.
You can use anything that you think will help to reveal truth. That includes works of fiction. I have recommended about 40 movies, which I will put up on the website. I've been saying I'm going to do that for about 8 years now, but I haven't done it. But I did read it off at one time when I had the time to do it.
Yes, you did.
Mm-hmm. Right. If I just did that once, but I don't know when I'll have the opportunity to do it again. But you can use anything that you think will help a person. That comes under the second area of activity. And the third, if you want to make it, education and entertainment. Everything is supposed to be educational. Politics is educational. Religion is educational. Education just means you learn how to solve problems in the most constructive manner. That's what we're put here on the planet for. According to what? According to compensatory logic, the logic of the universe. How do we know we're put here to solve problems? Because we have problems. We could have been born without problems. Whatever put us here in the known universe, us meaning all the people, could have put us here where no problems existed. We wouldn't be having any problems at all. We'd just walk around every day enjoying everything because there are no problems. Problems would be non-existent. Nobody has a problem of any kind. It's just perpetual happiness, which is what a lot of people say, including some quote-unquote constitutional law. You pursue this thing called happiness, whatever that means. Of course, the code says happiness happens. All right? That's the only way it comes. That's why it's called happiness, I guess. It happens, and then it goes away, then it comes back again. Otherwise, you have nothing to measure it by. But that's another subject, along with the subject that we're talking about. But yes, you can use entertainment. Look for the lessons in anything you're looking at. Now, you mentioned something called Harry Potter. I'm not familiar too much. I've never looked at anything. I've seen it advertised, Harry Potter. I don't really know what most of these stories are about. But if you see some stories in there or something said in any of these books or any of these movies under the title of Harry Potter, if that's what you choose to look at, then look for the lessons that you can use. Pick out those lessons and use those lessons to do constructive things that will produce constructive results. And you can pick anything. Always look for whatever you do, whatever you're looking at, whatever you can learn about. Just study it and say, is there anything there that I'm looking at that I can use either directly or indirectly to produce a constructive result, usually in the form of solving a problem.
All righty. All right, Swa, you know the drill. Don't be a stranger, but I shouldn't have to tell you that because you're not a stranger. You call, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, my brother. Listen, callers, my producer just informed me that we have many, many, many callers on the line, and obviously we are not going to be able to get to all of your calls, and that includes you in the chat room. However, you can do this. If I do not get to you today, or have Mr. Fuller, get in to answer your question, not to worry. If you call in next week, they know who you are because your number comes up. If you call in, you will go into the priority status so that your question so that you can ask your question and have Mr. Fuller answer. So don't be discouraged. Just hold on to next week. Now, for the chat room, I'm looking at one in particular for Waste Not. Waste Not, I'm probably not going to get to this question today. However, if you can write that again next week, I'll have Mr. Fuller address that. What that goes to is the popularity of this show. It is growing by leaps and bounds. And quite frankly, 2 hours isn't enough time anymore, but that's what we've been allotted to. One more thing. Let me do this real quickly, please, and then we'll go to you, Nicole, from Maryland. Listen, you need to go to producejustice.com, and if you do not have that book, you need to get the book. You need to get the book. This is the way that Mr. Fuller generates the revenue. Get the book. Give it to a friend or whatever you use the book, but purchase that book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. Mr. Fuller, I'm going to give you a brief word on that, then we're going to go right back to the callers. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
A brief word on what?
On produce on.
The book is designed to counter racism, help a person counter racism, because that should be our priority. When I say our, I'm talking about the people of color on this planet. And it should be the priority for white people who intend to produce a product called what? Called justice. Because there's no way that you can have justice and the system of white supremacy on the same planet at the same time. That's not going to happen. That's not ever going to happen. Why? Because the system of white supremacy is the most powerful political and religious system on the planet, and it's dedicated to maintaining the practice of non-justice, which means it's guaranteed to mistreat people and guaranteed not to help the people who are most in need of constructive help. That's the system of white supremacy. And to enjoy doing so, the people who practice it. They do it with smiles on their faces. You can see it sometimes on television, people who are saying that they believe in so-called white nationalism, and some of them will venture to say white supremacy. Some of them will say it's a big difference between the two. But that's, if they're going to say that, they should explain what that means, because anybody who uses terms should explain what the terms mean. But that's their choice. But I'm saying you can't have justice and racism on the same planet at the same time. That's never going to happen. That's impossible. You've got to get rid of racism in order to start producing justice. But you can go to the textbook for victims of racism you can get the book that shows an individual person how they can best go about doing this by going to producejustice.com.
Okay.
That's producejustice.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Fuller. Okay. Let's go to the 443, and that would be Nicole up on my screen. Nicole, good morning, and what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
First, let me say thankful to be able to hear the knowledge. I play your shows for conscious and subconscious minds. Now, my question is, does being meek, mastering the tree of life to reach manifestation, help to counter control white supremacy, which start at least a conversation for change in thinking patterns? I'm sorry, that goes to when I said I play your shows for subconscious and unsubconscious minds. But my question was, respectfully so, does being meek, mastering the tree of life to reach manifestation, help to counter control white domination besides reproduction?
Can the tree of life? What is the tree of life?
It was a thing that I was taught 20 years ago about subconscious and unsubconscious minds of yin yang, how to control feelings, how to eat healthy, and as you do the different disciplinaries, then you climb subconscious and conscious manifestation of your mind.
Well, if I understand the question, the code simply says, because codification is supposed to keep everything as simple as you possibly can, as long as it's true and correct and will lead to a constructive result. You just do whatever produces a constructive result. You speak in a way to everybody that produces a constructive result. Always keep in mind, why am I speaking to this person? Why am I talking to this person at all? I intend to produce a constructive result in this conversation. Otherwise, you shouldn't be talking until you get it all together in your head, how you're going to say what you have to say so that the result is always constructive. And if you're going to do something, you say, what's going to be the constructive result of this thing I'm fixing to do? Now, you can put it under the banner of the tree of life or whatever you want to say, conscious, unconscious, whatever terms you want to use, because words are just designed to accomplish what? Whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. They're just tools of communication. So whatever you do or say, the bottom line is, did it produce a constructive result? Because everything, every move that a person makes, everything that a person does or says, according to codified logic, is going to produce a non-constructive result or a constructive result. There's no such thing as in between. You can always measure everything by what the result is.
Right, neither high or cold.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Nicole from Maryland, and thank you for calling, and do not be a stranger. Okay, let's go to Imani. Let me see, get you in here real quickly. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Imani.
Yes, sir. Greetings to everyone. I'm calling because I'm with a group of non-white people who would like to read and or study your code book together. And I'm calling to ask Mr. Fuller on does he have a recommended way that we should go about doing that?
Yes, the code itself says that. You just talk to people. That's all. You use the term group, but whatever that means. But people basically are individuals. So you have a group when you're on the job. I mean, you just practice the code 24/7. Just practice whatever works. That's what code is. It's not Neely Fuller's code. It's the code of the universe.
No. I was talking about studying your book.
Yes, or you can just ask people to study the book, and you can talk to them about what's in the book, and either it's going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect, but it should produce a constructive effect, and that's it. Doesn't make any difference where the setting is. You know, you use it. That's why I said you use the term group. But what exactly is a group?
Well, in this case, it's over the computer, and we would like to.
Yes, go ahead.
It's over the computer, the computer program, where we would like to read your book together, is what I'm saying. And I was just wondering if you had a recommended way about that.
Yeah, let's do it the way that you just said, if it works.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yes, I mean, see, codification is open air. That's how it's described in the textbook itself. It means
exactly.
It's not confined to any particular place or time, and it's every place all of the time. That's what I mean. I mean, code is just code. It's just talking, but making sure that everything that is said has a constructive result. And everything, if it's doing something, everything that is done produces a constructive result. That's all of the code is supposed to be about. We are supposed to become a constructive people rather than a non-constructive people in everything that we say and do. And then this problem is solved.
Okay. All right, Imani, I was just told from Los Angeles that says tell the caller right now to use Zoom for his meetings, and that might help you. Don't be a stranger, Imani. Okay, let's go to Portland, behind enemy lines. Let me see here. Let me get you in here. Okay, behind enemy lines. Go ahead with your. Wait a minute. Are you there, or did I not do it? Okay, let me see if I can get you in here.
Hello.
Oh, okay, you're in. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you doing today?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good. Well, I wanted to share something that I discovered that the colonial roots of racism. Race was a new concept in the early 1600s, and race was not defined until 1606. And the first English permanent colony was Jamestown in 1607. So we've been dealing with this problem for a very long time. That's my VGQ. And my question today is, how do victims of racism and white supremacy who are on the bottom of a slave ship, what I call behind enemy lines, and who are subject to racism, who are classified as POWs, prisoners of whites, going to replace racism, how going to replace racism, white supremacy with justice?
How do you replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice? Was that the question?
Yeah, how the victims going to do this? Who, in my perspective, we're on the bottom of a slave ship, behind enemy lines, and we're also subject to racism, and we're classified by white people as POWs, as you also say, sir. So I would like to know, being very serious because where I stay at, these people are very dedicated to practice racism and not stopping. You know what I mean? So that's my question today is, how are we really going to do this? Because where I stay at, Portland, Oregon, to me, they want to create what's called functional inferiors. And Dr. Francis Webster came up with that term, functional inferiors. As long as we're inferior to them and we're functional in their system, which means also being non-constructive. To me, that's what that term means. So being functional is being non-constructive, and that's not logical, but I mean, that's what they're aiming for, always. That's what I can see by living in Portland, Oregon. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
I didn't understand the question.
You want to know how do we conquer this system of basically racism, which is white supremacy? How do we do that? Go ahead. Give it to us.
By using the counter-racist code. We don't have one. I'm trying to invent one, and everybody should try to invent one. Now, what is a counter-racist code? You study like you study anything. You study how what you are opposing is put together in whatever area of activity that you choose at whatever time you choose it. If it's in something that's educational, you study what's going on in education every day. If you're involved in it, that's right where you are. That's how you go about doing it. Each individual, wherever you are, on the job, or if you work in a school system or something, you're a student in a school, or you're a teacher in a school, you say, okay, what are we doing here? That's the first thing. And you go to those 4 wants in the code book. You can't be led astray if you go by those 4 wants. And then you also incorporate the 10 stops, which is also in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. And I don't know what page that is right now.
Yeah, we'll get
off
to that.
the top of my head, right.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing, if you just want to start off, go to the 4 wants, page 171, 172. That's the start, because that's going to be all through it, everything that you do, and that's going to be the finishing product. What do you want to do? You got to get that straight in your mind. You want to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. Okay. Why do you want to do it? Because the system of justice is better than the system of white supremacy. That's why. I mean, that's a logical answer. Okay. Now, how do you plan to do it? Well, the system of white supremacy operates based on a code. So you need a counter code in each area of activity. That every time they make a move, you make a counter move. Every time they say something, you know what to say in return in such a way that you counter what the racist intent is doing. We need a code. So you have to do that case by case. Everything that is said that supports racism, you say something that is counter to that support, that is effective. Because that will be the 4th thing. What was the constructive result that you tried? Now, if it doesn't work, it means you go back to the planning. You say, oh, I tried something the other day, and it didn't work. So I'm going back to the drawing board, and I'm going to study again what it is that I'm trying to counter, what I'm trying to erase and replace it with something better. So I'm going back to the drawing board and come up with a plan to replace what I'm looking at with something better. Because always try to improve every situation that you're in. And how do you do that? Through the process of questions and answers. That's what a code is. Questions and answers. That's how all problems are solved. Through the process of questions and answers.
Okay. And for those of you who want to know what the basic 10 steps are quickly, they are stop snitching, stop name calling, stop cursing, stop gossiping, Stop being discourteous. Stop stealing. Stop robbing. Stop fighting. Stop killing. And stop squabbling. Those
and
are
stop
the
stealing.
Yeah, stop stealing. Yeah, it's on here. Stop stealing. Okay, let's see here. Thank you, Behind Enemy Lines. Don't be a stranger. Let's go to Buffalo. AX. I got a few minutes here. Go ahead. What is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Hi, I wanted to ask about the Capitol riots. I wanted to ask you, I noticed that white people and white supremacists have different views. For example, you might have a white person or a suspected white supremacist say, that was terrible. And then you might have another one say, that was great. I wish that they did more, or I wish that they drugged them out by their hair and did more. But the question is are white people and white supremacists having basically, are they like, do they have are they debating this issue? Do they have different views on this issue? Some think is good, some think is bad. That's what it seems. Thank you.
Okay,
well, according to the code, yes, according to the code, what you as a non-white person, as a victim of racism, do when white people are fighting each other about anything that has to do with racism, you just stand back. Don't say anything about it at all. Just wait for everything to stop, if it is going to stop, and then say, okay, do we still have racism or not? That's the only question you're interested in. I mean, you don't get into the details of what they're fighting about, how they're going about fighting, what the disagreement is on a daily or minute-by-minute basis, whether or not they're tearing up something. I mean, because like in so-called civil wars and all that, like the one that they had back in what they called the 1800s, black people, victims of racism, when the prison board, you might say, in a prisoner of war camp, and the people who run the prison are fighting among themselves about how the prison is going to be run, you just wait and see if that means that you are going to be out of the prison, or that the prison is no longer going to exist for you. So you don't have to say anything about that. You just observe it. And when people ask you about it, you say, well, you know, you have to, if you got any questions about that, or if you want to make a comment on it, you make it to the people who are doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not involved. I mean, that's white people fighting white people. I'm not involved in that. They got their reasons for doing what they're doing. I'm just waiting to see what my status is going to be after all the smoke clears and everybody shakes hands and goes home or wherever they go. And what's my status? What has happened to me? That's code.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, my brother from Buffalo. Don't be a stranger. Let's see here. I don't have your name. We only have about a minute and 30 seconds to go. I'll tell you what, I'm going to get you in here, but you can also call in next week. And the reason why I'm doing it is because your name is not up here, so I don't know who you are. But you can call in next week. By the way, what is your name so I can get to you here? Okay, you're not on there. Okay. All right. Anyway, for those of you who, like I'm looking at Atlanta and a few others, those of you who did not have an opportunity to get in here today, we can see your name, or rather your phone number's up here. If you call in next week, then the producer will make sure that you get priority and you can go to the top of the line. Okay. So thank you for listening. Mr. Fuller, we got about 45 seconds. You want to take it away and make your piece here right quick?
Yes, just go to producejustice.com and tell others to do so if you want to be helpful, and get the book and then see what people say about it and whether or not they can use it to do the things that they think ought to be done.
All righty.
Hopefully, in the most constructive manner with the most constructive results.
All righty. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. We will try to do better next week. Thank you all. Do better, get better. That's us. You've been listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Thank you.